Hey guys, Mr. E here, and with Borderlands 4 on the very imminent horizon, I think it's time we talk about a very important decision that all of us aspiring Vault Hunters will have to make before launch day, and that is, what character are you going to be rolling as initially? Certainly in the future, there'll be time to roll all the other characters, play every single one to your heart's content, but whichever one you pick first, in my experience, usually ends up being your baby for a good long while, so I think it's important to invest due diligence in getting the right one for us right away. That's why I'm making this video. We're going to be breaking down two main factors that I usually consider when I'm looking at rolling a new character in these sort of games, and that is, firstly, and most importantly, I would say, the mechanical aspects. What sort of abilities does this character have? What sort of builds can you expect to be orienting yourself towards? What are the passive abilities and synergies with certain classes of weapons? Say, for instance, you're a shotgun user. Is there a class who's better at shotguns than others? If you're focusing on elemental damage, maybe there's one for that. And then the second factor, which is less important to me, but I know is absolutely very important to a lot of players, is what is the sort of backstory? What is the aesthetics of the character? If you don't like the character's style, if you don't like how they talk and walk and hold themselves, and what sort of quips and banter you can expect from them, that can go a long way towards your enjoyment of a character, especially coming from a game like Darktide or Vermintide, where, like, you know, liking the character's attitude was a lot of playing those characters. So we got some very, very unique and interesting attitudes and aesthetics in this game with the four playable characters, and we'll be getting all of those. So make sure you are liking and subscribing if you're enjoying Borderlands content, if you want to see more on the channel, to encourage me to keep making these videos, and let's dig in. Alright guys, and just for full disclosure, there are going to be some minor spoilers to these characters' backstories. If you are not yet familiar with the backstories of the characters, go check them out. There's a small, like, 2 to 3 minute video on each of them that Borderlands has put out, so you can understand a little bit more about these characters' personalities and what their origin stories are. I'll be kind of summarizing here, but I'll link them in the description in case you haven't caught them yet. I think they're pretty entertaining, and they give a little bit of humor, but also they are pretty dark and brutal. All these characters have some pretty messed up stuff going on in their histories, which I guess makes sense why they would subject themselves to the vault hunting life. Starting off with Aman, because he has alphabetical dominance. Aman is a berserker. He is part of a clan of people who were killed trying to open the vaults, and he has learned that lesson that the things inside the vault are not to be tampered with, so he is in the business of hunting down these vaults and killing the beasts that are inside to protect others who might fall the same fate. His origin story shows him stopping a bunch of vault cultists from opening the vault and killing all the people who were observing the spectacle, and he does it in a pretty brutal fashion. As far as aesthetics go, I'd like you to imagine Reinhardt if Reinhardt was a psychopath. He pretty much looks almost exactly like Reinhardt, including down to the voice. He is a big Germanic dude, and he brings a lot of brawn and muscle and stature to the field. So as far as Amon's abilities and combat prowess, he is your frontline bruiser boy. If you are interested in playing a big beefy man who gets right into that melee combat, does not afraid of anything, and is okay with taking damage just as long as he can beat the enemies into a pulp in exchange, he's going to be your choice. He has a ton of talents in here that boost not only his melee prowess and his close range damage, but also his health and tanking abilities as well, so he is absolutely going to be the tank of the group. But that isn't to say that he doesn't have some special tricks up his sleeve. He is not all simple unga bunga beat the skulls into the enemies. He also excels at a couple of elements, and those elements are primarily fire and cryo. He has a ton of abilities that either can be optimized to be used with fire or cryo-based elements, and those can either freeze enemies or burn enemies away respectively. So if you're interested in playing one of those elements, he might be a really, really good build to go for. And finally, let's talk about his ultimate abilities. He actually has a unique thing going on here with his ultimate abilities. I'll call them action skills because that's what the game actually calls them. He has 3, just like all classes do, but he has a passive that modifies these abilities and gives them an extra feature. So for his abilities, he has Crucible, he has Scourge, and he has what is called Onslaughter. Now, Scourge is like a shield, Crucible is throwing axes, and Onslaughter is going into berserk mode, basically like punching enemies to death. But when you are equipping those abilities, you'll get get an extra ability through your Forge skill passive. Just for an example, if you're in the Crucible tree where you are going to be picking up the ability to throw axes, sort of like your Olaf from League of Legends, you are going to get the ability to put these axes together as a big spear and hurl it in boomerang style. It'll cleave through enemies and come back to you. So not only are you picking up one ability by choosing your Scourge, but your Forge skill passive is going to give you a whole second ability, which can be great because these abilities, as you've probably seen in the gameplay, are very, very powerful, and having an ability off of cooldown pretty routinely is going to give you a lot in terms of damage output. So if you're interested in bruising, if you're interested in freezing or burning your enemies, and you like playing a big beefy Germanic guy who has a deep rumbling voice and an appreciation for murder, Aman might be your choice. The second in our series of Vault Hunters is Harlow. Harlow is a creative super genius who has been defrauded by the Malawan Corporation, who've stolen her technology and are using it to line their own pockets. Tale as old as time, basically. Her backstory features her arresting a Malawan caravan, killing everyone, and of course stealing back her own invented technology, and then dispatching one of her distant relatives. She happens to be a member of the Trant family, who are a famed and quite storied family within the Borderlands universe. Seems like the Trants are quite prolific at padding their numbers out there in the wilds. But as far as other backstory and personality, there's not really a whole lot to dig in on here. I haven't gotten a great feel for who she is as a character or her interactions with the cast. She just seems like you're a pretty typical, like, really smart science girl, and you know, if that's your thing, good for you. But I think we should really focus on her abilities here, because her abilities define the character, and she is kind of the elemental queen of this setup here. If you're interested in spreading elements and proliferating elements between all of the enemies on the field, causing all of them to burn away or melt away from mass destruction, she might be a really good choice for you due to an ability, the passive ability called Entanglement. Entanglement causes all enemies who get touched by her action skill to become entangled. Surprise, surprise. And this entanglement is a quantum sense of entanglement. When you damage or sort of shoot one of them, it's going to proliferate and hit all the rest of them as well. And there's a ton of talents in her tree that utilize this entanglement and can spread differing sorts of effects or give you certain buffs when you're hitting entangled enemies. That means that she is very, very heavily reliant on her action skills, of course, because you have to be using your action skills to entangle enemies. And that means we need to dig into what her action skills are. They are basically witchcraft, but science-based witchcraft. And let's start right away with 0 Point. 0 Point is just Maya's stasis lock ability from Borderlands 2, the siren bubble, where you just pick an enemy up and lock them in the air and blow them up. That's 0 Point for you. And she is able to pick enemies up, and then that obviously puts them into stasis, and then you can slam them down on the ground, and it causes like radiation damage to everyone around them. Pretty cool stuff. We've also got the ability that they call Chroma Accelerator. It is more or less just a really, really big energy orb from Half-Life 2. You can spec this to just be a massive nuke that you send out in one direction, passes through enemies, pulls them in, and then explodes. Or you can spec it into bouncing around the arena like one of those aforementioned high energy, dangerous little orbs that just ricochets between enemies and nukes them all. And then finally, there is Flex Generator. Flex Generator is more of a defensive ability that's going to give you lots of regeneration when you're inside this energy field, and also it's going to damage enemies who are walking in the radius. So if you're interested in sort of holding down and locking down one area and torturing all the enemies inside of it with cryo damage, this might be a good skill for you. With that being said, her general talent tree is really heavily oriented towards doing elemental damage and spreading those status effects far and wide. As we said before, her entanglement passive is going to share that damage between enemies, and there's stuff in the tree that's going to allow you to share the other effects as well. As far as elements, she really goes heavy in on radiation. She's got a ton of skills in here that deal with radiation, which is how her abilities deal most of their damage, and that can be pretty cool if you're interested in building for radiation stuff. She also has some slight focus on cryo in a few of these skill trees as well. So if those are the elements you are looking to build towards, I would recommend her as well. If you are really interested in a ability focused class, one that is really heavily going to just nuke enemies with their big blasty cannons, she could be a really strong pick for you. Next up is Rafa. Rafa is a TDR super soldier. He happens to have a exoskeleton that it makes him a speedy ninja assassin, basically a mobile weapons platform. This TDR exoskeleton not only has the awesome ability to, in classic TDR style, digistruct all sorts of weapons and tools for him to use to eliminate enemies, but it also keeps him alive. It is the only thing stopping the normal gravity on the planet from crushing him, since he is a denizen of an asteroid belt, a microgravity climate. So his body literally can't pump the blood that it needs to, and it can't breathe if this TDR suit isn't active. So he lives every day with the prospect that death might be around the corner, and in fact, his intro story shows him being tortured nearly to death by a TDR CEO who is cutting his suit program, all in the name of saving some money, of course. Now, Rafa responds by murdering the CEO for attempting to deny him life-saving healthcare access, and in my opinion, that makes Rafa pretty much categorically based. He also, as you might have noticed from my little intro there, has a very, very sexy sort of I don't want to say Hispanic. I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know exactly where he hails from, but he has a very much Puss in Boots accent. We'll just say he's a Puss in Boots in a lot of ways, right? He is also facing down his own mortality in the face of every day could be your last. He needs to live up to that potential, and he has this very cavalier sort of, I could absolutely imagine him in a wide-brimmed hat with a big long feather in it and a rapier in a hand. And of course, that little rapier fencing style would not be sort of out of the picture for Rafa, since Rafa's passive ability is called Overdrive. Overdrive enables him to go into Overdrive, and Overdrive gives you a boost of movement speed and damage from all sources when you activate an action skill. And while that skill is active, it's going the whole time, so you are going to be a very, very fast boy with Overdrive. Now, this is a pretty tame passive as compared to some other classes we're going to look at, but it is very impactful because there's a ton of other ways you can stack speed on this class, and I think he is absolutely going to end up being the Zane of this game, where he's just blitzing around the arena at 1,000,000 miles an hour, deflecting bullets, dodging bullets, and returning that damage in kind. As far as abilities, he has a couple of different digistructible weapons that he can use as abilities. The first one is Peacebreaker cannons. These are little shoulder-mounted cannons, kind of like the Predator's cannon, that sort of track enemies that are near your cursor and do damage to them. You can augment these things to do all sorts of different damage effects, shoot rapidly, shoot like big blasts. He also has arc knives. Arc knives are more or less the mantis blades from Cyberpunk. You can digistruct these big long blades in your arms and go in for some melee assassination mode, moving super fast, cutting through enemies' torsos. This really reminds me of Zero. It's kind of like a mix of Zero and Zane. And there's a lot of Z's there, huh? And then we've got Apophis Lance. Apophis Lance is your big blaster that just can blast enemies with a ton of damage across the map. And that's sort of your action skill setup. As I spoke to earlier, his abilities in his tree, he is very much the gunplay guy here. He has a ton of stuff in this tree that is all about just specifically like shooting weapons, whereas a lot of the other classes are very much focused on their elements and stuff. He has a ton of boosts to his direct damage, as well as ricocheting bullets, indirect fire with like lobbing grenades and stuff. He seems to be very much structured to be a jack of all trades, as his suit allows him to be. There's not a whole lot of stuff in his tree that focuses on any given element, so he might be a good pick if you don't really have a particular like elemental build that you're locking in on. He seems to just provide a ton of boosts to lots of stats across the board, so he could probably take the fire rate and critical rate of lots of different guns to some pretty absurd limits. So if you're interested in playing a very, very speedy, sexy assassin, Rafa might be a good class for you. Finally, we come to Vex. Vex is the siren of the group, and her siren powers, as all the siren powers seem to sort of evoke themselves in different ways, her siren powers are warlock abilities. She can not only hex and curse enemies and blast them with more or less eldritch magics, but she can summon allies to her aid. She can either summon Trouble, who is a very, very large basically Tiger to fight for you, and Trouble can be buffed to some pretty crazy extremes to the talent tree, but she can also spec into a talent that allows her to summon individual clones of yourself that can either shoot at range or go into melee combat. Lots of different ways of using the dark arts to do your fighting for you. Although I think the best reason to play Vex is because of her attitude and her backstory. She is first and foremost like a brooding emo girl, and I always love that sort of character, but she has a backstory that places her in the middle of more or less a Black Friday sale at a big box retail store, and she has a panic attack because people are being terrible to her, and unfortunately for them, she awakens her siren abilities and massacres the entire store. So that makes her pretty based, honestly. I think we've all probably been there if you've ever worked retail. Now, in terms of her actual abilities, as I spoke of previously, she does have lots and lots of magic casting abilities. So if you're interested in a caster, in the terms of along those lines of Harlow before, where I said Harlow is very much focused on like really getting the most out of entangling enemies with her abilities, Vex is very similar. She is very focused around building to the strengths of her ability powers. There's lots of ways you can boost your own damage as well, but I think you'd be hard pressed to make a build that isn't going to rely around these abilities being like the bread and butter of her class. She's got tons of things in here that can cause her abilities to apply hexes and debuff enemies, or she can like multiply her minions to crazy extremes if she's going for the ranged or melee minions. She can make Trouble turn into a giant badass. She can like empower Trouble to some crazy limits and have them go and murder or even explode them on enemies and then resummon them next to them. So lots of different ways of getting damage done here without having to directly be in the fight yourself. She doesn't have a whole lot of synergies with elements necessarily, but she does have some pretty unique talents in terms of being able to apply bleed, and she has a passive ability that can make the most out of any element because her passive is called Phase Covenant. Phase Covenant allows her abilities to synergize and take the elemental properties of whatever weapon she's currently using. So she can say, okay, this boss has armor, so therefore corrosive would be effective against it. If you had any normal ability, well, maybe you're playing Harlow. Harlow's abilities do radiation damage. That's not going to be effective, but if you have a corrosive gun, you hold it out for a second, you can attune your Trouble to now be corrosive, and now Trouble gets to cut into the armor as well. So pretty cool that her abilities have extra synergy with whatever elemental gun she's holding. This isn't to say that she can't necessarily get some extra bonuses. There are some talents down in the tree that do give you extra bonuses for like playing with one element or another, but she is kind of element apolitical in that sense and really focuses around minion damage, crit damage, and bleeds, and stacking kill skills. She loves a good kill skill. So if you're interested in summoning minions to do your bidding and slaying enemies with hordes of well, they're not undead, they're just clones, Vex might be a great choice for you. Alright guys, and that is the full cast currently. There are plans for adding more Vault Hunters in the future. In fact, I think the Battle Pass has them adding multiple new Vault Hunters within like the first year even. So we've got lots to look forward to, but I am very excited for this game. Definitely going to be replaying it on launch day and beyond, so look for more Borderlands content. Let me know if you're enjoying it down in the comments. Let me know what class you're going to be playing and why, and I'll see you guys out there. Mystery out. Bye.